Welcome to a very special episode of The Workshop where we talk to the who's who of the Indian auto industry to know what's what.
In today's episode, we speak to the man behind the team that gave us this. Pratap, welcome to the workshop. Thank you so much for taking the time out, and we've been waiting to get this in place since basically the Auto Expo.
Yeah.
Just to give you some context, this is not going to be like a formal interview, even though it seems like it right now with the entire setup. For no other reason that frankly we don't know how to do formal.
Good.
Sometimes we wish we did, but we just can't. The idea here is not to get something very product specific. It's about talking to people who are generally interested in design, including, of course, in automotive, but not limited to it. The idea here being that we want to understand what goes into becoming a Pratap Bose, your personal journey, what input somebody who is looking to get into automotive design would want to get in here in the modern day, and also along the way get your inputs about design in general. Frank opinions are entirely encouraged. There is no time limitation. Anything you want to say, feel absolutely free. You want to swear, we'll figure it out in between. So
Everything is editable.
Yeah.
Lots of
beeps
lots of
in between.
So nothing to worry about on that front. What I'd like to begin with is not talking about any technicality. What I'd like to begin with is, how was Pratap Bose in school? Like, were you a good student? Were you somebody who enjoyed the physics, biology, maths part of things, or was it somebody that you just wanted to be that Darshil Safari from Thar.E? My pursuit is in a different direction. I want to start going in that. And where did that, let's say, the trigger for design come in for you?
Yeah, so anyway, thanks for having me, and I'm glad it's actually quite informal. I'm also happy that we're doing this because, on a daily basis, people reach out to me saying that, how can we get into design? How can we get into automotive design? Or they've already, started jobs and they want to move to design. So I'm glad we're doing this, and I hope it dispels some myths, and I hope it reinforces some truths. Because I think that's my job. Sort of, as a design leader, that's one thing I want to sort of leave behind with people. There's some harsh realities associated with design and automotive design in India.
Right.
And just because they see flashy cars that we are launching, or me or someone else standing on a stage talking about design, that's not the design career on a daily basis. So I think there is some misconception around that. So I would love to clear that. Now, coming back to school, I of course was born and raised in Bombay, and my school had two very distinct phases. Till the 5th standard, I was kind of a grey student, let me say. I would just about get by. And then in the 5th standard, I won what is called a progress prize in school. Progress is, they see your grades in your first term, they see your grades in your final term of that year.
Right.
And the person who made the biggest delta gets that prize.
Which board was this?
It was ICSE.
Oh,
so I
okay.
studied at Cathedral in Bombay.
Okay.
And so I won that at the end of the 5th standard, right? This progress prize. And from then, there was a huge jump in, my own academic, let's say, ability. And I got better and better in school. And but I would never say, never a class topper or never anything like that. Always, I would say in the first 1/3, I would put it. But I enjoyed playing sport. I enjoyed, I enjoyed things like physics and chemistry. Maths to me in the 11th and 12th standard sort of got away from me. I mean, I just said, okay, this is not for me.
Everyone.
When we went to hyperbola, parabola, when it starts becoming abstract,
Yeah. Why are there alphabets in my mind?
When it leaves the basic calculator, that's when they
It
started
was
getting
so
complicated.
abstract that I got lost there.
Right.
And then, of course, having said that, in junior college, because that's the system we have in Maharashtra, I moved to Jai Hind from Cathedral. And but I was always drawing cars. I was always in love with cars.
What was the first sketch?
I have no idea. It was probably,
The 3 box
yeah,
with
it
the 2
was,
wheels.
it's like how you actually describe a car to a child. It probably was that. But I remember, that first love for design came, because I had a friend whose brother was studying architecture at JJ School of Art, and I used to go to his house, and we used to go and have play or study or whatever, and I would see the models he was creating, for buildings, for landscapes. The elder brother. We had no idea what design was, and that was my first exposure to design, architecture. And for a few years, I thought that's what I'll study. Till this moment which changed it towards car design. I used to live in Colaba, near Colaba Kaf Parade, and went to, where the Taj is. Beautiful building.
Yeah.
And I saw a 280 SEL then, and I said, look, I now know that someone designs a building. There must be someone designing cars. And this is, of course, I'm talking about late 80s, early 90s, no internet. So you try and dig whatever you can find. And that sparked this whole, fascination for car design, which, by the way, we had no college teaching us. We had no college teaching car design. So I got into, studying about design first. And I think that was important and probably was the right thing to do at my time.
So what was the avenue you had to take that give that passion some direction? How did you start putting it into an academic term? What was the first trigger you got? Okay, this is the path I can start taking to get where I want.
So to be very honest, in those days, design meant someone walking around with a khaki kurta and a bag, and still dependent on your parents.
It almost sounds like the archetype of a journalist as well.
Today, probably, big glasses.
So that's kind of what design and art meant, right? And my father and my parents are always from the corporate world, and all our friends, someone was going to study engineering, as you did in those days, right? Engineering or medicine or law, the proper professions. So I kind of hid that I wanted to do design for a long time. But, the other avenue was to go to the States. So I visually made it look like I'm really serious on going to America to study.
Okay.
And I applied to the colleges, got into some very good ones, got scholarships, etc. But I kept this National Institute of Design thing on the, not back burner, but under the surface, under the radar.
Right.
In those days, you had I don't know how many column centimeters it would have been, one ad which would come out
Right.
in only some national papers. And you had to then go to the State Bank, make a demand draft for 100 rupees, send it to Ahmedabad physically.
Oh God.
To sit for the test, which was only in 5 centers in those days.
Right.
So I did all of that. I used to scan the papers every day because they never told you when the ad would come out.
Yeah.
And you miss the ad means you've missed it for the whole year. So it's like,
because right before you came in, I was stalking your LinkedIn for a bit. Right?
Yeah.
And NID stood out for me.
Yeah.
1997, you got into NID.
no, 92 I got in. 97 I got
was
out.
born in 93.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
92 I got in.
Describe the NID experience, because anyone who's been there always talks so greatly about that institute. I think it's like one of the, I want to say, cornerstones of design for this country.
Yeah, I'm getting
journey.
goosebumps while I think of it. In those days, there were 2 schools of design. One was in IIT Powai. It was called IDC, Industrial Design Center. But that was a post-grad course only in those days. NID was the only undergrad course. So you could go straight from school, basically.
Yeah.
And like I said, I filled out that form, demand draft, then got a letter saying, okay, so-and-so day, JJ School of Art was a center where you would go to give the exam. There was I had no idea what's going to come in the exam. There was no past papers. There were no coaching
Nothing
classes.
to reference with.
Today, there's everything, right?
But do you remember what was in that paper?
Yeah,
And
I remember. I remember quite a few things. So I remember you had to draw a cat in scale to a chair, for example, scale.
Okay.
You had to draw a ink pen nib, the fountain pen nib, 10 times the size of the original. So they would then study how much detail you put into that, into that drawing, basically. So did you draw the slit for the ink? Did you write the name, if Parker or whatever?
Yeah.
So that's how they would test your observation. They didn't expect you to be a designer or an artist, right? But they would test your creativity and your observation skills. And once you got through that, you had to go to Ahmedabad for a 3-day interview process, psychometrics, group working, all of that. So I don't know if they do any of that today, but that's how it was. And then 30 odd people would get in, and I had told my parents, I'm going to America. Here's the scholarship. I'm going to apply. The day the letter in a brown envelope came from Ahmedabad, and it said, the first word was congratulations. I said, that's it. I'm going to Ahmedabad.
Was there any sort of, obviously when you're getting into a creative pursuit,
Yeah.
you go in with rose-tinted glasses at times. It happens with our field as well. People
Yeah.
see us driving these nice cars and assume, oh, that's the job.
That's
He gets
life.
nice cars
Yeah.
and then he goes
Yeah.
and eats food. That's it.
Yeah.
What was it that you felt was one of those bubbles that were burst early on when you got into designing?
See, actually, I had no image of a car designer at all.
Right, okay.
Today, like I said, there's car designers everywhere. There's designers, artists everywhere, fashion designers, those days, I think our only reference was from fashion design and architecture.
Sure.
Maybe, Charles Correa, you had B.B. Doshi, you had Hafiz Contractor, and the fashion side, you had, Rohit Bal. So those are the only design disciplines that were visible.
Correct.
I don't think I had ever met a product designer in my life before going to NID. So I didn't have an image which could have got burst in that sense.
Okay.
Because there was none. I mean, there was no reference for me.
But in that context, is there a bubble you want to burst
Today.
Yeah, of course. I mean, like I said earlier, what people get to see when we launch a car is probably less than 1% of what actually
Goes
is
into it.
involved in designing a car. I mean, I'm speaking now specifically in automotive design. It's not about those flashy launches and amazing films and show cars. And behind that, there's a lot of rigor, there's a lot of skill, there's a lot of really hard work. So a lot of people say, sir, I want to be like you. Please tell me the way. I mean, it's literally those lines.
Yeah.
And then I realized that maybe there's something wrong in that,
Sure.
because it's like me writing and saying, to Shah Rukh Khan, I want to be like you, No one sees the effort, the hard work, the sacrifice that goes behind that. So,
How does it look like as a journey? Because this may sound like a dumb question because I'm completely unaware of what that, let's say, chronology works like.
Yeah.
So we are aware that you have your rough sketches that you start off with. Any given car starts off with a rough sketch, then you refine, you get more detail onto
Yeah.
it. Today we're moving on to digital renders, and then we get into more detailed 3D models
3D,
of that.
yes.
You have clay models. Is it a smooth sort of flow where you move from one step to the next, or are these things or skill sets that you learn in parallel?
Yeah, and I think, this is one thing I would like to say to anyone who's trying to get into design and automotive design, is that you have to develop a suite of skills. Not just, technical skills like a sketch or a 3D model or physical modeling, but you also have to know about society. I don't think enough people look at that in terms of design. Where is society going to go? I was saying yesterday to my team that you have 36 months to design and engineer a car. Your customer today could be a 15-year-old who will be 18 the moment your car launches, right? If you are not there at that intersection, then you've missed that person. The other thing people say is, oh, this car is for 45-year-olds, 50-year-old, whatever. A 50-year-old in my father's generation is a very different person than a 50-year-old today.
Correct.
So when they say, oh, this is for 50-year-old, it's this luxury sedan with wood and, a place to
Ashtrays
smoke
and-
your
yeah.
cigar. That 50-year-old 30 years ago is not the 50-year-old of today, right? So you have to understand society, dynamics, economics, all of that. That's the other side that you have to develop. Finance, internally the money has to, the money that you spend on developing a car, as you guys know, anywhere between 800 to 1200 crores. You have to earn that back and make a profit, right? Because that's how companies run. I mean, you have the enormous responsibility. I go to our plants, Chakan or Nasik or Zahirabad. There are all those people on the line building your product, and you can't let them down, right? Because why do factories close? Why do companies pack up? It's not always a product, but it's a combination of things.
Correct.
So there's a huge amount of responsibility, I personally also feel, to get it right.
Yeah.
But it should not make you, you should still stay bold. Because I think launching a boring product is the first recipe of
Beginning
a
of the
disaster.
end.
Yeah. You have to stay bold.
Right, Pratap, I just want to pick on that point where you said designers kind of need to have a social lens,
Yes.
right, and be hyper aware of what's happening in society
Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of this one line that you had, I think, multiple times, in fact, posted on your Instagram story, and it's a line that has kind of resonated with me and it stuck with me. And you said, "Changing convention requires conviction."
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful line. As someone who is stepping into any industry as a leadership role, or in any let's say focusing on a section that needs change, right? How does one build, let's say, the self-confidence? Okay, this is something that I am willing to stick my neck out for. This is something that needs to happen. And this is something I believe the customers will accept rather as the new normal.
I'd say it's a combination of both, expect as well as accept
Yeah,
somewhere
sure.
down the line. So
No,
it's
I totally get it. When you're pushing the boundaries, it's not that me convincing myself or the team, right? It's also you have to convince the ecosystem inside the company first.
Yeah.
Because the customers only get to see what you launch, and that story therefore starts 3 years before that. So I'll give you a simple example for the BEVs. When I joined the company, it was truly a fresh sheet of paper. There was no architecture, there was no Inglow, but we had an idea as a leadership team of what these BEVs should be, right? Because we were doing electric origin. They had no product that came before it that we were then modifying to become electric. So they were from scratch. And I still remember we in the team explored some routes. Some were a little more traditional, some were out there. And B as a sub brand was born from that, because it looked like no Mahindra car before it. So we didn't say, okay, let's create a brand called BE and do a car.
Yeah.
We actually created a sketch of a car and said, let's call this B.
So the design ideology led to the creation of the brand.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. So there was no brand called B before we started.
Mad.
Can you tell us which was the first car, or what was the concept that kind of sold the idea of brand B to the?
Yeah. So we had a Mahindra DNA in the 4 other brands, and we said which one should we electrify first, and that's why I said, so there were a range of sketches and proposals we saw, and this one stood out because it was a sports car cabin on an SUV base. I mean, it was as simple as that. Sure. One of the designers literally took one of the sports cars that I'm not going to name and one SUV from us, and he literally created a Photoshop image of that. There's this cabin and that was the basis for the sketches. And it was so different that it didn't fit into any of our 4 house of brands. It wasn't a Thar, it wasn't a Scorpio, it wasn't a Bolero.
Yeah.
So we kept that as one possibility. And then the other one was in this XUV world, because that was dynamic, performance, all of that. And we said, okay, we'll try this. And for the first time, when I showed those, they were thermocol models. We make them, going back to your question. So we did sketches, we do some digital data. And then to get an idea of what the vehicle proportions are, you make these white foam models. You just paint the glass, paint the tires. And I showed that to the management, and and then, you see their faces. Does it light up? Does it not light up? Is it confusion? What is it? But you have to tell a story. So we also show some films. We show where the world of design is going, where automotive and non-automotive is going. We were seeing buildings coming with some really very, very faceted shapes coming up around the world. And we said, look, visually people will start seeing this stuff. Yeah. Not only in cars, but they will see it in other things. Graphics was becoming like that, much more splintered. Shoes, clothing. So you have to, in a way, bring in some background education to the other part of the team. See, a colleague in your leadership team could be seeing, Excel sheets all day, every day. Yeah. Someone could be seeing just a technical drawing of a component all day, every day. You have to pull them, zoom out, and show them a larger picture first. And that's what we do. We never just say, oh, here's a model, do you like it or not? There's always a background story you have to explain. And when we did that and then removed the cloths over the model, they were like, is there any reason why we can't do this? And that's the bit I like. So they said, we must do it like this. And then, of course, Velu and his incredibly crazy team from MRV. So Velu went back from Bombay after seeing those thermocol models and told his team that not a line from this will change. Whatever has to happen to make these two cars hit the road in 30 months from now, we will do. So we didn't change. In fact, when we showed the car, people still thought it was a concept.
It was a concept, yeah.
It still looks like one when people drive it around. Someone from our office also bought one and in the bright orange color. Right. And it's like, what? What?
And Tushar, this is why, because 3 years ago when we started that, we kind of foresaw where the world is going to go. And you have to come and get that timing right. See, design is not about something looking ugly or pretty or it's all about the timing.
Correct.
There's a window in which you have to launch a design. If that window shuts or you've gone past it, then it's a problem.
On the window front, how much, because I'd like to believe there's such a thing called a designer's gut, right? Where a lot of thing is like, okay, no, the designer feels it'll work. And then there's data, because today we're living in an overload of data and information, right?
Yes.
How does one balance that? How do you say, okay, the data is saying something else, but I think the...
Yeah. See, a lot of data is retrospective. That means you've collected that data by showing a target group, something that exists. It's very difficult for any ordinary person, including myself, to imagine what's going to happen in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years in a product category. If you ask me in this camera, what's going to be the camera in 7 years, I won't know, right? Because now it already moved to the glasses and, but you can't predict that. So what do you get from data is that how a product fits in someone's life. What does it do to him or her? So the data tells you, I want something more emotional or more sporty or more dynamic or projects an image of me in a certain way. That's what data can tell you. Why do people buy SUVs? Why? That data is very clear. That you sit higher, it gives you a clearer view of the road. We have not so great roads in many parts of the country. It helps you over those. And there's an emotional side, which is the projection of your image, of what you are. This is what data can tell you. But it can't tell you what the next SUV should be. If we follow the data, you would never have two coupes launched together. We launched two coupes. The XEV and the B are actually coupes. That is classically not an SUV. Right?
For a brand that has been championing the typical boxy line along with it. I just want to pick a little bit more because this feels like, I don't know how to, if not sounding too casual.
No, so just to finish his point, the performance we knew was going to be amazing because, by the time Velu and his team had figured out what the pack size would be, what the power of the motors would be, we knew the performance of the Inglo architecture was going to be mind-blowing. We had to therefore skin that. We had to create two cars across two brands which were different but had this real performance feel. You guys are the original petrol heads with fuel in our veins and all of that.
Every
right?
stereotype.
But,
True.
and many of y'all swore we will never drive an EV because it can never be as much fun or it can never be as dynamic or as exciting. But then we've gone and shown that it can be done. It's just a different type of driving pleasure.
I think that was the beauty of what happened with B as well as the XCV, that everyone else went with EVs of the future, EVs are green, EVs are going to do this. It's about functionality. Mahindra doubled down on the emotional aspect of what a car does, and hey, it happens to be electric.
That's it. That's the first thing Rajesh told me, is that don't force your design to say that this is the EV. It's an amazing design. People fall in love with it when they see it, and it happens to be an EV.
I think at least in that context, I appreciated the fact that you weren't trying to position those two cars as eco warriors. They're like, hey, this is a fun car, this is a fast car, it just happens to run on batteries. Please go have fun with
By
it.
the way, that's the other thing that data tells you,
Yeah.
right? That people buy EVs not necessarily to save the planet. They buy it for many other reasons. There's not just one linear way of thinking.
Yeah.
So people did tell us that the drive quality of a EV, the silence, the acceleration, the performance is something we love. And I can't go back to an ICE. Many told us that data told us. So it's not necessarily like you're saying a greenwashing, eco warrior. It also happens to be good for the planet.
Yeah.
But over and above everything, it's a great product to have.
Sure.
I drive an EV, and I think I'm going to stay with that. So
Especially in India, I think what people, even product planners often seem to miss is how much, like, we want fuel efficiency, we want space, yes. But it's the second biggest purchase we ever make in our life.
that's it. Yeah.
How much emotion is vested into that? People will change the decisions, they'll make compromises other places if required, if it represents the right extension of themselves. Because they
Yeah.
want to live with it for at least 4 to 7 years.
Yeah.
It's not a small deal.
Yeah, and
to
look,
pull that
all
off.
of us have a car story, right?
Yeah.
All of us. I don't have I don't have a toaster story. I don't have a washing machine story. Of course, till it broke down. I haven't called my toaster, anything.
Yeah.
But people call their cars. They give them names.
Yeah.
They've got emotions attached. You always remember your uncle's ambassador, and 8 of you cousins jumped in.
Yeah.
You remember the first car you learned driving in. So, a car is, I always say, is one of the most living, non-living objects.
Correct.
I'd agree.
Because it really has, in our lives, it's got such an important emotional place.
What did you name your car?
Oh, yeah.
Or what different car names have you had?
So,
throughout your history?
the first car I bought with my own money was a Fiat Punto. I used to live in Italy then. And why did I buy it? I bought it because Giugiaro designed it. So it was that Punto. I've got amazing memories of that car because that was my first car. I happened to be living in Italy. I went all over Italy in that car. So the memories attached to it was that. The second car I bought was a Seat Altea. I had my daughter, so we needed a bigger car. That was designed by Walter De Silva at Seat. Those were his magic days in Seat. So I always have a kind of a designed by reason.
But if not you, then who?
No, because I respect them so much. People like Peter Schreier, what he did in Kia, it's still a benchmark for me. In fact, there was a period, of time in my career where I saw what he did at Kia, and it was such an inspiration. Not because of the authority he had or whatever. You don't look at titles, and you look at outcomes.
Yeah.
And what he did there, and then later in the Kia Hyundai group was it still is absolute benchmark.
And quite a sharp turnaround as well as from where they were in the early 2000s to where
People
they are
used to
today.
laugh at Kias in Europe, in America, but no one does anymore, right?
Absolutely.
Assuming right now you're driving around in an XEV 9E,
Yes.
what is it? Do you have a name for the XEV?
No, it's a company's car.
Oh.
So there's no name yet.
So the day you buy it, you'll give it a name possibly.
Yeah.
All right, Pratap, now I want to kind of steer the conversation into, say, more core design. Let's discuss philosophies and what is currently working in the market, stuff like that. I always ask any designer that I meet this question, and I have to ask you this. What do you think of minimalism as a concept? Because obviously this is something that we've seen kind of snowball in terms of a movement over the past decade odd, where people are saying, oh, less is more. But more is actually more also. So how does one balance that? What are your thoughts on using that as a guiding philosophy?
So, for us who studied in NID in a certain phase, NID was established in the 60s, 70s, very much in line with the Bauhaus school of design in Ulm and in Germany, which is all about form, function, that balance. And so I'm very much from that school of thought and school of design. So for me, form and function are very closely linked, and but form must also follow emotion. That's the addition I want to put into it. So even if something is very minimal, there has to be some elements which connect with you emotionally. I'll give you a couple of examples.
Yeah.
Everyone says Apple. I'm going to move away. If you look at Bang & Olufsen, for example, extremely minimal. Minimal in its shapes because they're circles, they're primary, cylinders, rectangles. But the way they treat every detail, the way when two materials come together, if there's wood and aluminium, first of all, it's real wood and it'll be real aluminium. When they, or textile on a speaker, the way it's stretched, those things give it beauty. So while on paper it might look like a very simple, minimalistic, shape, it's in those gorgeous details, in the care that they take on every radius, that you will start to build an emotional connection with those products. So you can be minimal, but you can still be emotional. And I'm also, I hate things like fake ducts on our cars, or, if something has no function, even beyond the visual function, it shouldn't be there. So again, I'll come back to the basics. You've got, for aerodynamics reasons,
Correct.
you've got the air curtains. Those are there for the air to flow. I could have just put them without any function. Lots of people ask about the scoop on the hood, actually, which is really floating. We had lots of conversations in engineering and design about that. But it had a pure aerodynamic benefit, and that's why it's there. So form, function, emotion, I think these three are that balance. I'm not of the school of thought that puts something for decoration, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, what is the Indian design DNA? So to me, that's not like putting peacocks in the fabric, or or those patterns, because that's just superficial. That doesn't make it Indian. For me, if it's designed, engineered, manufactured in India with pride, that's Indian. So to go back to your question, decoration for the sake of decoration is not my personal design philosophy. Form follows function, yes, but it must lead to emotion.
So the follow-up question to that would be, say, for example, you were referencing a Bang & Olufsen speaker, for example, you're picking out on detail. How does one, especially a student of design, right, how does he develop the eye for picking up on details and to start appreciating these things? How does one really, is there a process, or?
So I think initially you have to do it consciously. So you have to be a curious person, first of all, as a designer. If you're not curious, then you can't be a designer, right? Like, no one teaches a bird how to fly. A bird just naturally starts flying, right? It'll fall once or twice. No one teaches a fish how to swim or whatever, So it has to become a natural part of you. And so I can't force someone to say, oh, look at the joinery on this table, or look at the way the detail in something has been resolved. I mean, I used to look at rain channels in cars in those days. The rain channel is how you manage. So the Fiat had it as a strip over the two doors, over the door frames. The Ambassador was also like that. Then came the European cars, which had it on the roof, with that black strip. Mini does it in a different way. The entire roof has a rain channel. I used to look at small details like that, but it has to come naturally. So it's not like someone will tell you, oh, look at that detail. So if you are not naturally a curious person, I think it's very hard to force someone to become a designer.
Correct. So that's actually one of the questions I wanted to ask. That is it like comedy, where you inherently need to be a funny person for you to start looking at a professional stand-up comedy profession, or can you learn how to become a designer if you don't inherently have that inclination? Or
I think you'll struggle. You'll struggle. Doesn't mean to say that you can't hone those skills, and you don't have to sharpen those skills, by the way. You have to sharpen those inherent skills all the time. But if you don't inherently have a level of curiosity which matches a aesthetic point of view, then I think detail for detail's sake is not enough. You also have to have an aesthetic inclination or a bent of mind. Like those two switches not being in line troubles the hell out of me. So things like that. 99 people will pass that and not even think about it, right? But if you get a designer in the room, it will trouble that person. And it's not just OCD; it's also just the aesthetics of it.
But how do you manage egos then? Because even if somebody is making a rough sketch, it's very personal to them. And when you have a team of people imagining what this car should look like to meet whatever future need is there, it's like my perception versus your perception. How do you manage that battle? Because technically horsepower is horsepower. Design is not so straightforward. How do you balance that
It's
between
very subjective, right?
Exactly.
It's very subjective. So one is, of course, in our selection process into Mahindra design itself, we try and see, what that person brings to the table, not just in terms of aesthetic qualities, but also as a point of view. I can tell you the B6 was designed by a Canadian designer who's sitting in MADE and did the B6. That was his point of view, which we loved, right? The global pickup concept that you saw was designed in MIDS by a designer here, but it will be a global product when it comes out.
And the Thar.E?
The Thar.E, again, there's no product called Thar outside India.
Yeah.
But there was a sketch that, a kid made in MAD and it became the Thar.E concept. So the idea can come from anywhere. And don't forget, my job, ultimately is not to design anything anymore. My job is to direct the designers and the design team into a certain direction. That's why it's called design director in many cases. To guide them to a direction for a design that makes sense at multiple levels, not just aesthetics. Has to be able to be manufactured at the right price, to be able to then be sold at the right price, to also have a place in the brand. So I'm looking at it at a little more global sort of level, not global, but I could say, let's say, higher altitude, whereas designers could be just sitting there and thinking that this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? But it may not fit into the larger picture, which is why, and that's my job to explain, okay, why didn't we choose this sketch and why did we the other one? Because I can explain a context.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important. So then you don't feel like you lost the design contest.
Correct.
Because, out of the hundreds and hundreds of sketches we make, it's those one or two that will end up being a car on the road, for forever, really. I mean, apart from architecture, I think cars live with us for the longest time, right? You may have it for 5 years, you sell it on, someone else then buys it, it goes on. I mean, we still see cars 20, 30 years old, right, on the roads, even in India. So it has a long life. So to win a design contest internally is a huge deal for a designer. But then, we put teams together, everyone has a contribution and they can see that. But you're absolutely right. Managing not egos, but the disappointment sometimes is important. But that's my job because I've gone through it as well. So
when you enter a particular space, let's say today Mahindra is predominantly an Indian car manufacturer. But again, you have markets like Australia, you have South Africa, you're expanding markets as well, especially with products with your BEVs. That's definitely going to be happening. Is there a consideration that these are the tastes we're catering to? Like you spoke about future-proofing. Who are you future-proofing for? Because the sensibilities of an Indian buyer can be quite starkly different from that of a South African buyer. How do you find that middle ground?
There are some things which are common, and the real success, the standout success for us in overseas market has been the 3XO. We launched it in South Africa. It's done very well. It won, sort of car of the year, and so it shows that something in that 3XO as a product inherently resonated in that market. And what are some of those things? The visual strength it has, the features, for that package and that price point. So it's a combination of things, not only design, of course, but it's how the product is put together and what value it brings to the customer, and that's resonated. At some levels, for example, there's a difference. So they love the all black interior. So our 3XO in South Africa, for example, is an all black interior. And so is it, for 700 in Australia, etc. So there are some local tweaks we have to do. An all black interior would be hard to sell here for some reason. I don't know why, but everyone likes light interiors, airy. Then they say light interiors get dirty.
It's literally damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right? It's always that, because that's us reviewers are guilty of this as well. When it's
this got dirty.
Exactly.
But what roominess! Wow. Then I give a black car, it will be like,
looks
it
premium,
makes it
but
feel cramped,
makes it
but it
feel
looks good.
claustrophobic. We've got a line for everything.
But the good thing is that nowadays with bigger sunroofs or fixed glass roofs, you're getting more light into the cabin, etc. so you can take care of the roominess and claustrophobia and all of that. But yeah, there are some tastes which are different, but I've seen by and large. And Tushar, don't forget, India is as global a market as you
Absolutely.
can imagine.
Absolutely.
I mean, in fact, there are some cars which are only in India and not anywhere else.
True.
Even from global manufacturers. I'm not talking about us. But there are specific cars for India that other international OEMs launch here. So as a market, it's a very, very global market in that sense.
Yeah.
You have the latest from all manufacturers in terms of design language, in terms of aesthetics. Some things work and don't work, but by and large, the Indian customer is exposed to pretty much everything.
True.
I'm going to pick on that bit of how demanding an Indian customer is, and I want you to kind of reference it with, say, for example, a modern Chinese customer, because very recently you went to the
And
big
got my
auto
mind
expo.
blown. Yeah.
Because anyone who's attended an auto expo in China, they're like, hey, why is someone who was making a fridge yesterday making a car today?
Yeah.
And all of them seem to have suddenly developed 500, 700 kilometers of range. Cars are flying over speed breakers, doing tank turns. What's fundamentally different between customer mindsets and how, let's say, how the car brands by themselves operate?
Xiaomi is a great example, right? 3 years ago, I mean, they still do.
Yeah.
They make
Mobile
battery
phones.
chargers, phones, consumer electronics. I mean, they had no history of car making, right? And they've gone and done what they've done, and it's a very, very impressive product. And there are others like that. Huawei will do one maybe, and there are so many. The thing we saw there was that the approach was almost from a software interpretation of what a car should be, rather than the hardware. Traditionally you come from the hardware side, right? What is the motor going to be? What's the battery? What's the platform? What's the architecture? There they come from a experience point of view. What should if you're using a Xiaomi phone and you're using a Xiaomi appliance, how do you extend that experience of the brand and the company into an automotive product? That so they don't look at it as we are going to do an EV, we are going to do a XYZ, but extend that experience that people feel when they use our other products into the automotive world. And that's exactly what they've done. So if you look at their from the UI, UX, HMI side of things in the Chinese ecosystem, it's like phenomenal. I went and saw cars which had almost no buttons anywhere. It's a good thing or a bad thing is a different case. But that market is so used to doing these things on the screen. I mean, I saw doors with just one switch. So here we have the door with the the driver's door will have the
power window control,
the regulator for the ORVMs. It'll have the window control for the guy at the back. Front, and then some other things. So you have like a switch pack, which is the size of the entire armrest, right? There was just one window lift switch, and that's it. Everything else was on the screen. For example, it's a choice they've made, because that's how Xiaomi or XYZ sees the world. They don't see it coming from, we've got this switch pack from our previous car, now we have to carry it over onto this, otherwise the investment won't work. So they're not bound by any laws or any constraints that a traditional car maker may have. So and many of them are therefore coming through the Chinese ecosystem like this. The second thing, which we noticed was that the supply chain and the supplier base is themselves technically very, very strong. So it's not like the manufacturer tells them what to do and then they go off and make it. They're not makers. They're actual innovators of ideas. So what therefore happen is that the so-called car maker is an aggregator of lots of these different ideas, so, and lots of these different technologies. The things we saw there were mind-blowing. But the ecosystem of suppliers is equally or actually beyond the cutting edge of the OEMs themselves.
Wow.
The way they have display screens outside the car, forget about inside. They have LEDs on the front bumper. They have big message boards on the hood. That's like someone saying, I can do this for you. It'll survive the rain, sand, heat, and you can put it on the top of your hood. which is the hottest place a car gets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, but they put a full digital screen on top of that with messages. You can send a message from your phone,
Yeah.
to
Display
the
it on-
car saying that, hi, I'm charging, but I'll be back in 10 minutes. You can have my place then. You can communicate with anyone who's around. You know, so how did that come? It doesn't come from a traditional car making mindset. Because everyone from that traditional car making mindset will say you cannot put
Cannot
a
do
screen
this.
Yeah.
on top of the hood.
They're limited by legacy.
Yeah,
in
there'll be
many ways.
hundreds of reasons, right? The bird will sit, the rain will fall, the heat, UV. These guys, they don't know that. So it's like, no, it can be done. We'll do
It
it.
doesn't exist in the universe.
So you're saying when there's no real fear of limitations, you just go all out and
Because you don't know
that
what
is
the
where
limitations
it's
are in the first
Yeah.
place. You can't fear something you don't know, right? In that sense.
True.
So they don't even know it's a limitation. So they just find some incredible ways of integrating all of this into an automotive product.
Now I want to move the conversation to just the sheer range of products that Mahindra has, right? You've got a Bolero on one end, you've got a B6 on the other. Very different TGs, very different ideologies that customers follow. How does one figure out and how does one balance delivering for, say, tier 2, tier 3 customer at one end and delivering for, say, maybe the top 2%, top 5% on the other?
Not just that. Trucks, tractors,
Yeah, I was gonna
buses,
say,
yeah.
tempos, everything. LCV is also in between.
Three-wheelers,
Yeah.
Yeah.
last mile mobility. It's a huge, very varied portfolio. So there, one thing we've done, and it's a good thing we've done, is that we made this into a house of brands, and not sort of, let's say, one Mahindra and then everything is the same, right? So, and even in design, so we've got very clear cues for the 4 and now the 5th sub brand. So, Thar, Scorpio, Bolero, XUV, and
B.
So this is clear that each one will grow vertically, right? Because what did I realize? I realized the common thing about Mahindra customers is they love Mahindra. They buy it for very, very actually even in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. Yes, there is a functional requirement that they have, but they still buy it with a right brain, emotional
100%.
connect.
They do.
There's a huge emotional connection.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I joined the company. The Thar had been launched. The XUV 700 was the first launch that I was just part of. It was in August 15, 2021. I was surprised that there was a waiting list for products because other products were there in the showroom. So I said, okay, if someone is not getting a Thar, you can buy a Scorpio, because also price points overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, the more I understood the customer, is that the Scorpio customer is not a Thar customer,
Yeah.
is not a Bolero customer, is not a XUV customer. A Scorpio customer is a Scorpio customer. A Bolero customer is a Bolero customer. Even in our portfolio, because I was surprised that we had so many overlapping products in the same price band.
Yeah.
For example, I said, there'll be cannibalization, this won't sell, so people will go there. None of that happened. That's why you have 2-year waiting periods for some of the models.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they will not swap to what's readily available, even at the same price point. This is very different in Mahindra. So there's a Mahindra emotional connection across, but there's also a very brand-specific alliance.
Correct.
And this is something which took me some time to actually unpack and understand.
Right.
And it was also one of the reasons why we did B, because suppose you are a customer and you didn't fit into any of those 4 brands, that means you never walked into a Mahindra showroom.
Yeah.
And that's what we saw, that there were some people who didn't walk into our showroom. So B was one of the ways to, how do you increase numbers? There are only 3 ways. One is you get more of people who love you, but there's a limited. Second is you get people from other brands to love you more, so you jump. And the third is you get people who don't even have a car to make Mahindra the first car. And we saw that in 3XO. Many people, many, huge proportion of those 8,500, 9,000 that we sell never owned a car at all before. And they've jumped straight to a 3XO. Many people in the Bs have currently got or have owned cars from all other brands, including premium brands,
Yeah.
premium European, Korean brands, they've come into the BEV world.
Yeah.
So that's another pool of that you've tapped. And the third pool is, like I said, people who love you, you have to make them love you more. So someone from a 500 will come to a 700, move up the ladder. Someone from a classic Scorpio will come into the N.
Yeah.
But you have to work on all these three pools of customers.
Right.
And so going more specifically to that question, the customers are different in each of the bands. The part which is common is the Mahindra. Never lose that. A lot of people say, oh, it would be amazing to have a Pratap Bose Mahindra sedan. It would be amazing to have a minivan. Knowing what not to do is sometimes even more important than knowing what to do.
Fair.
So there are some things, when the brand got redefined in 2021, we said we are a SUV maker and we will make certain kind of SUVs. The spirit of adventure, this exploration, all of that. That you have a Mahindra SUV and you decide on a Friday, I'm going to drive and go to another place, another town. I have nothing that inhibits me, because you can depend on this vehicle. Why did we push for a 80 kilowatt hour battery on the BEVs? Because it gave you that real world 500, 550 kilometers. I think the certified range is, I don't know, some 800 something.
Yeah.
But we have declared our, true
Real world
on-road, real world 5 something, right?
Right.
So you can't never shortchange the customer, respect that. In whichever market, whichever city, whichever country he or she may be. I think that's fundamental to us. We don't take the customer for granted.
Yeah. Pratap, you spoke about Mahindra having house of brands, and it very naturally leads me to, and I have to ask you this because you're possibly one of the few people in the automotive industry who's worked with a Ratan Tata and an Anand Mahindra. Any interesting anecdotes you want to share?
Yeah, I think, in both cases, what's common is the vision. They have a vision for the country. I think that's very important. It's your vision for the company is linked to a vision for the country. And, many people don't have that. A lot of people have just a vision for the company,
Yeah.
We want to be this, we want to be that. But if you look at their vision statements and their reason to be in business, it's actually to make India better and stronger and Indians, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the common thread. The other common thread is both are from an artistic background. Ratan Tata studied architecture, Anand studied film. So they have this amazing aesthetic sensibility. You asked for an example. I mean, we were showing a model to Ratan Tata in the Pune studio, and he walked in and he felt there was something wrong with it. And he said, look, is it set up correctly? Because it looks like the back is a little lower than the front. I said, no, it's all checked. And sure enough, after he left, we measured the sill in the front and the sill in the back, and there was a 8 or 9 mil difference. I mean, not even a centimeter. But he picked that up. These are some of the things. Anand, when we were doing the new, he's very, very passionate about our logos, our corporate image. What it means. When we were presenting some things to him, for the B logo, we went through multiple iterations with him to get it right. Because somewhere it looked like an 8, and somewhere it looked, and he picks these things up, right? And how we should place it on the car. So these are some things which I think are extraordinary that both have. R&T had and Anand has, and it's been, you're right, it's been an absolute, what can I say, pleasure, yes, but it's truly a privilege. Going back to another, sort of small story, we were working on the Pixel concept.
Yes, that's actually quite viral on WhatsApp. It still keeps resurfacing every
Yeah.
now and then.
As an Apple
that is coming.
car.
That is coming up.
Apple car.
As an Apple car.
The Tata Nano is making a comeback, and people are like, this is launched. I'm like, who told? What? When did that happen?
So Pixel concept, we were designing the car between the UK studio and Pune, and then we had these sort of 40% clay models. Now, if we hadn't got a go-ahead, we wouldn't have been able to create the actual show car for Geneva. We needed a cutoff. And, he couldn't, for some reason, travel to Pune because he had many things in his schedule. So we brought that model to Bombay. And to to Bombay House.
Oh wow.
How did you get it?
Yeah, so we brought it somehow and we put it in the Bombay House lobby. So he came down, where the elevators are,
Yeah.
and the bust of J.N. Tata is there. We put it there, and we had a presentation there. He had a Wacom tablet, in a little ante room in his cabin. I've gone and tried to help him with Photoshop or whatever. So the great thing is the interest they have in life, in design, in technology. But like I said, above all, it's a vision for the country. I think that is truly. It's not like we'll make a great company and great products and then it'll somehow positively affect India.
Yeah.
It's the other way. So what can we do to make India move? What does it take to then do? And that's why it's a group of companies. It's a conglomerate.
And both organizations are very historically linked to the country as it grew into what it's become today.
Both around this 47, 49. All then 70, 80 years ago. So I think those are the things I've been very privileged to have experienced.
And I think it's also that inclination that gives you the ability to be audacious.
Yeah.
Because if they're going to do it, then it's like I can have the confidence to push the boundaries myself.
Yeah.
Now we're getting some warning signs that you have to be let go. But there's one little thing we need to do before we let you go.
Should we?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay. So what, Pratap? This is just going to be a quick rapid fire. This is mostly so that we get good Instagram fodder and maybe we'll add you as a collaborator if you like. Right? It's a pure design, whatever you prefer, okay? And there is no both. You can't say both.
Okay.
You have to choose one.
My God.
Okay? And we're going...
I'm in the spot now.
Yeah, very, very old school, very classic, very iconic things, okay? Not too many of them, so let's quickly rush through it, okay? Ferrari F40 or a Porsche 959?
Wow. I would say Porsche 959.
British Racing Green or Rosso Corsa, the more iconic color?
British Racing Green.
Doubling down, Jaguar E-Type or Aston Martin DB5?
Wow. E-Type.
Same. The more timeless designer, 911 or a G-Wagon?
911.
American Muscle, Mustang or Camaro?
Mustang.
Your poster bike would be a cafe racer or a super bike?
Cafe Racer.
Okay, I knew that, but okay. I'm surprisingly not very surprised by his answers. British Racing Green was a bit of a shocker, but yeah. We'll move the radar to Mahindra. I know all of them are your babies. I know it's like asking a parent to choose what's your favorite child, but only one answer, okay? Bolero or Scorpio Classic?
Scorpio Classic.
Scorpio Classic or 3XO?
3XO.
3XO or Thar?
Thar rocks.
Oh, that's going to come up later. 3XO or Thar?
3XO.
3XO or Scorpio N?
3XO.
Ooh, 3XO or Thar Rocks?
Rocks.
Rocks or 700, 700?
Rocks.
Rocks or XCV 9E?
9E.
9E or the B6?
B6.
Oh, there is a favorite. I knew it would end up at the B6. And while we are on there, what's your favorite color on the B6?
The
orange?
The orange, yeah.
So
Fantastic.
Desert Storm Orange or whatever it's called.
It looks too good. It looks like a reflective jacket that's going around.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. But great fun talking to you, Pratap. Thank you so much.
Very unsurprisingly super enjoyable. Exactly what we expected. It's been a fantastic conversation. We'd let it go on for at least another hour if we could. But
thank you both, and I hope we catch up again.
Definitely.
100%. Thank you so much. That was it for this episode of The Workshop. If you've liked this video, don't forget to give us a like, drop a comment. If you want to bug any of us on Instagram, please do. Please don't send him requests to send you free cars.
Free cars, jobs.
Yeah, that is something he won't do.
Servicing.
Yeah.
Oh God.
That is not something that's going to happen. But let us know what you thought about this. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye.
Thank you.